So let's get started. And because I know the both of you and possibly people on the recording as well are jumping straight from a work environment, which is kind of a fairly activated thing for our systems, into kind of learning mode, which will be a little bit softer. I'd like to take a minute or two just to do some breathing and some balancing activities. So if I can invite you to make sure you're sitting on your chair comfortably, not necessarily leaning back though, if you've got a back on your chair. So kind of sitting a little bit forward, and make sure that you have points of contact on the ground. So for me, I'm sitting on a little stool. So my point of contact is my legs across. So sort of the side of my feet and ankles are what's grounding me. Yeah. Yours might be the flat of your feet. I also invite you to close your eyes just to take out that visual stimuli, and it helps to activate our vagus nerve just by tilting our head forward, not right down. There's no stretching of the neck, just to where it's comfortable for you. Opening your mouth slightly and breathing in through the nose as smoothly as you can and out through the mouth. And it sometimes helps to let some sound out. We're kind of taught to keep our breathing silent, and there's nothing really more comforting than that to our system coming from us and our voice. In through the nose, a little fuller breath than what you would normally take, and out through the mouth. And just as you continue breathing comfortably, feel the point at which your bum hits your seat, because we're going to kind of use that as a pivot point to rock very slowly. And you can either rock from side to side or front to back, or a combination. Slowing it right down. Feeling the pivot, which will be just below your belly button. You'll feel maybe some tightening and relaxing in your belly, depending on which direction you're swaying in. And remembering to breathe. Allowing your arms to drop, your hands into your lap, or to be held by the arms of your chair. And just breathing, feeling your shoulders relax, especially with the exhalation. And just gently coming back into our meeting room when you're ready. The rocking and the breathing is a self-soothing mechanism. We're used to being rocked as children, so giving us just a minute even of just rocking very slowly in whichever direction our body wants to go is actually a way that we can parent ourselves. Again, give ourselves that self-soothing. So welcome, ladies, and welcome to anyone who is watching the recording on YouTube. Our topic for today is using the sailboat analogy to navigate life. And it's one of my very favourite topics. I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you. And I'm guessing that you can all see that. Can you see that? Just thumbs up if you can. Yeah. So the sailboat analogy comes out of positive psychology, and there are a lot of ideas and practices in positive psychology that are highly accessible for people to learn to reparent themselves and to step back a little bit from being immersed in the emotions and upheaval of life, to step back a little bit and start the journey, for want of another word, of understanding what makes us do what we do, or what causes us to do what we do. So we're going to jump straight in. And whoops, did that just go blank for you guys? Yeah. Okay, so Louisa May Alcott, very famous author, said, "I am not afraid of storms, for I'm learning to sail my ship." And essentially, using sailing or the sailboat as a metaphor for life talks about the job of any proficient sailor is to determine where's the destination, what are the resources that I have and require for that, what sort of skills do I need. I have a steering wheel or a helm and a compass to get there. They know, a sailor knows that they're going to be confronted with malfunctions and leaks, maybe interference, or they may even require the assistance of other boats. They are simultaneously connected to what's going on in the water that's around them and also the weather, so that they can make adjustments to their sails that take the best advantage of whatever the conditions are that they're sailing in. And they also know when to seek guidance from the lighthouse to avoid being shipwrecked. So the little illustration on the side is the sailboat analogy in icons from positive psychology, with one addition. In the positive psychology version, there was no lighthouse. And that being important to me and many people, I've added it, and we're going to go through each of those little icons, what they mean in the metaphor, and then how we can look at them as part of what's going on in our lives. Does that make sense? Just thumbs up if that does. Awesome. So we'll start with the water. So the water for a sailor is their environment and it is their reality. So when we apply the idea of the water or a reality or environment to us as individuals and our life, the question then is, what's going on in my world right now? And if you've got a piece of paper, I recommend that you write down this question, even though something may have popped into your mind straight away. Right? So I'll answer this for me, and the questions are then for you to write down, and as I'm talking, maybe think through which things apply to you and your reality. So for instance, for me, I've recently moved to North Queensland and I've bought a house that is indeed a renovator. Also bought a commercial building and started a cafe. So my reality at the moment, what's around me, is a lot of time, a lot of work, and a lot of my energy going into those kinds of things. Also, I have one daughter and grandchild that lives up here, and a partner, with all of the pros, cons, ups, downs, and ins and outs of partnership. And most of my friends are quite a long way away. I really know very few people where I am now, apart from on a kind of business level. Now, I could go into, and so could you, lots more detail about what's going on in your reality. So, for example, those ups and downs, ins and outs and so forth that I talk about with my primary relationship, that will have a different flavour for all of us, right? And you'll have more detail around what that is for you. So it's just a description of what's going on at the minute. The second little icon is the weather, and the weather by nature is uncontrollable. So it's in an application to us, it's the circumstances, events and situations that we don't have within our control. So the question is, what things are outside my control at the moment, and how can I navigate around them? So for instance, remember a few years ago, we had the whole COVID thingy going on. That was one of those uncontrollable events that many people changed huge aspects of their lives in order to navigate around that. Okay. There could be other things. So for me personally, when I first moved up to North Queensland, both of my daughters were within a 2-hour drive. So I had both daughters and 3 grandchildren, all kind of within a short distance from me. And then about 2 months after I moved here, my eldest daughter and my 2 granddaughters moved down to New South Wales. So they're even further away than they were before. So that kind of circumstance, other people's decisions and actions, although that impacts me in whatever way that it does, it's something that I navigate around, because I guess it's inappropriate of a mother to say to a 25-year-old, you can't move, all right? So write down that question for yourselves. It's kind of a 2-part question, is what things are outside my control and how can I navigate around those? And again, you can go into lots of details. So you can look at the relationship aspect, the living aspect, housing, finances, work, look into lots of friendships, look into lots of different areas in your life and say what's going on there that's not of my choosing or not of my, within my control. Make sense? Okay. So the other thing that a sailor has is a destination in mind. And so the way that looks to us in our daily lives is our goals, if you want to put it on very masculine terms, our desires and aspirations, which are a little bit more feminine in nature. So goals, in my head anyway, goals I attribute to things that are professional or pragmatic or career or finances, that kind of thing. So I may have a goal of retiring by 62, for example. And that's something that I'm choosing to create for my life. I may also have desires and aspirations that are completely outside of the realms of work. Very often we make our destination and give a lot of our energy to our workplaces and our careers as if that were more important than all of the other aspects that make up our lives. So when we're talking about destination, it's holistically, what does your life of your greatest thriving look like? And your greatest thriving could have something to do with work. Okay, so for me personally, even if I could retire, I choose to stay at work simply because I love what I do, right? And it is my desire and my aspiration to continue doing this kind of download, I guess, if that makes sense. And I'll have desires around, you know, my partner, how I want to interact with my family. What does that look like in my perfectly thriving world? Because we're all looking for happiness. The flavor of it can be a little bit different for all of us. And in line with that, obviously the steering wheel or the helm is what moves you in the direction of your destination. So hopefully the steering wheel is meaningful direction that's based on what you most value, and your actions are congruent with that. So, for instance, I may say that meaningful direction at a school level, students may be encouraged to have a direction to become a lawyer because they have, you know, terrific grades, enough to get into the school, that kind of thing. Okay. So a student's encouraged to be a lawyer, for example, and I'm only picking on that because it's a kind of high profile, high energy career. Yeah. And so what happens is if a lot of value is given to the career aspect, we sometimes sacrifice other things that we say we value. And certainly we know a lot of people in high profile careers, high job earning status careers like lawyers, for example, who would say that they value health and that they love and value their family, and yet those areas are very often sacrificed to the higher value of the workplace. Does that make sense? And that's why I've put up their meaningful direction, because a lot of our direction may simply be to have more time to sit and navel gaze and feed the ducks, because that's what allows you to thrive, is having that little bit of time where you can sit with nature. That's a meaningful direction, every bit as much as a career choice or a relationship choice or whatever. So the question in here that you can write down is, am I moving in the direction of the life that I choose? So am I being coherent and cohesive with what I say I value, and what's going to bring me to my highest level of thriving and my highest level of potential, whatever that is. So obviously, looking at values is an important activity, and it's something that we often could do, would do, should do, never do. So if anyone is watching this and is interested in receiving a big list of words that describe values and doing a little activity where you kind of sift through and get the top 20, and then you sift through again, and then you sift through again over a space of time rather than one big hit. If anyone's interested in receiving that worksheet, it is part of our Certificate 3 in Personal Empowerment, and I'm also happy to give it to you to have a little play with, because obviously this meaningful direction and having ourselves at the helm of the life we choose is pretty important. Would you agree? Yeah. Okay, so moving along. Our sails, so in the metaphor, they represent our strengths, our available resources, and any of the mechanisms that we've developed some mastery, skill, and wisdom about that enable us to ride the storms of life with some grace. Might be a little bit of grace, might be a lot of grace. So this question for you then is, what resources can I use to propel myself forward? And that then brings us to, well, what actually are my strengths? So there's a really good personal reflection activity to say, you know, my strengths are seeing the big picture. Where before I may have berated myself for being less than detail oriented. You'd also use that to describe me, right? I can reframe that and say, I actually am very good at envisaging big things and getting the ball rolling. So sitting down with yourself and having a look at that values list, and then also thinking, what actually am I good at? Including the things that people tell you you're good at that you blow off the compliment. So what resources can I use to propel myself forward is our sales. And obviously our sales, having a bigger sale, more resources, more strengths, enables us to move more swiftly and gracefully through the ocean of life, if you like. Our leaks and other malfunctions. So in the world of personal development, this is often called our shadow. And so these are the areas of weakness that we have, and blind spots. So those things that we are perhaps weak at and still unaware of. And they are also our coping mechanisms that are ineffective. So to give you a couple of examples, one of the coping mechanisms that I had many years ago when I was doing very big hours with a relatively new business and a young family, one of my coping mechanisms was that I would get home from work, drop my bags, take a deep breath, pull the bra off, pour a glass of wine. And so every night, my coping mechanism and my reward was to have a couple of glasses of wine, maybe one while I was making dinner and then one when I was having dinner. So while that, I'm going to say it worked because I did it for a long time, and actually it also didn't work, because what it did was allow me just, okay, that's my point of relaxation. And alcohol, whether it's alcohol, whether it's shopping, whether it's, you know, whatever your mechanism is for dealing with big energy and big days, may actually be counterproductive to your health. And that's what I mean by ineffective coping mechanisms. So if you were someone who was a rabid golfer, for example, your coping mechanism for a heavy day at work may be to play golf 3, 4, 5 times a week. And that may be healthy for your body and a sacrifice to your relationships. Also an ineffective coping mechanism. So just give me the thumbs up if that does make sense to you. Yep, great. So the question with this one then is, what issues hold me back from my highest potential? And for me, one of my issues from holding me back is that I am very quick from thought to action. So I respond very quickly. Because I respond very quickly, I sometimes fail to gather all of the information I need in order to make a decision. So I basically make a decision propelled by emotion, if you like. So for me, that's actually a weakness. And I'm glad that it is come into my consciousness rather than being a blind spot weakness, because once I know that, I also see myself doing it and can pull the reins on it a little bit, if that makes sense. I think it does. So I'm also a little bit hot-tempered. So you may have a whole bunch of issues that you would say hold you back from your highest potential, and apply the words highest potential to the highest potential in my relationship. the highest potential in my finances, the highest potential in my career, the highest potential in my friendships. So look, break it down into little pieces like that, because we're talking about you wholly rather than just a targeted area that, even if you're working with that area at the moment. Okay, so moving along. We have the compass, which is our internal feedback. So our internal feedback can be our feelings, our emotion, our gut instinct about things, and our intuition. Internal feedback can also be things like headaches. Okay, so let's say, for example, you've done a week or two straight of highly stressful circumstances, whatever they are, to do with work or something going on with family or whatever. So you've had a couple of weeks of high stress, and now your body's starting to give you headaches. That's internal feedback. It's also internal feedback, and I'll use the same example, to go through lots of stress and then snap at somebody that has nothing to do with that stress. Okay, so we're a busy, stressful day at work, come home, the kids, the partner, the neighbour, whatever, does something that would normally be something that you just rode over, and you're snappy. So that's also feedback to know that your system is activated. And one of the things that I think are extremely important in learning to understand how we operate as humans, and then how we operate as individuals of being humans, is for us to really pay attention to what our whole system is telling us. Might be our intuition, it might be some stresses and some pain in our bodies, headaches or whatever it is. It may be the clenching of our stomach or the catching of our breath. When those things happen to our system, we would do well to be paying really good attention to that and what's going on with us inside. Okay, so the next one is other boats. So other boats are all of the people that are around us. So they can be in our physical vicinity, they can be telephone distance, email, Zoom call away, anywhere in the world. They can even be, well, certainly, you know, younger people who do the whole like thing and do lots of social media. You know, people that are well outside what my age anyway would consider friends can have an influence on them. So family, friends, colleagues, even strangers, even Facebook friends, or whichever app's being used at the moment. So the question here is, who is impacting my experience and how? And you could literally draw a little image with yourself in the center, me, a little smiley face. And you could put other little circles all around you at varying distances and varying sizes. So, for example, it may be you in the center, and it may be your significant other in a touching circle, for example. And then you may have children overlapping that. You may then have friends and neighbours and work colleagues, and then, you know, moving out to old school friends, and then Facebook friends. So those are all other boats in the water. And some of those boats will have a really positive impact on you. So, you know, people that inspire you, people who teach you, people who support and care, all of those things can have a positive impact on your boat, on your world. And then there will be other people whose impact is kind of like them bumping up against you and maybe even causing some damage at times. So that's another little interesting activity that you can do, just to work out what's going on around me, and are any of those boats that are close to me boats that I would thrive better if I moved away from or closer to. And the last one is the little addition that I mentioned that I made to the positive psychology model, and that is the lighthouse. And so in a totally non-religious sense, I have a sense of belonging to something much bigger than just me. I believe that there is divine guidance, whether that's a message between me and the world and the divine, who knows. I also believe that there are things that are truth, and that we feel truth very clearly in our bodies and our beings, in the same way that if we're listening, we also feel lies. So when I talk about the lighthouse here, I'm talking about whatever is the truth, divine guidance for you. It might look like synchronicity. It might look like inspiration. It might look like intuition, right? Something bigger that you belong to and can take wisdom from and with. So what guides and supports you? And that may be one of the religions. The question is simply what guides and supports you. What does that look like? So here's the whole metaphor for the sailboat. And what I'd like to do is to just open the floor for, I'll just shrink that down a little bit, for each of you to have a, oops, have I still got the window? Can you guys still see the window? Yeah. Yeah, so for each of you to have a look at what you've written down and just that whole picture, and if you're comfortable to give us, you know, a little bit of a snapshot of, say, one area of your world and how that applies. Who's going first?
I'll do.
Thanks, Mel.
So one area I was focusing on was family. So my family consists of my own children and my stepchildren. Both, all of them have their own lives and their own things going on. And I guess, yeah, just sort of re-centralised, I guess, my thought process around things I can control, things I can't control, how I react to them, what my strengths are to support that relationship that I want with them, that I can't force upon them. I can't force that relationship back my way, but there are things I can sort of bring to that with my own strengths of, having my own strengths of being able to show love and being able to communicate and those sorts of things with them. So for me, the people around me are very important. So again, that partner is in that inner circle and my kids are in that inner circle, but I've also got, other family members that can also, I guess, bring that situation back closer to home for me with my kids and that relationship there. So yeah, all very, very interesting, and yeah, just recognizing my own strengths and what sort of holds me back and where my leaks are in my boat to that situation. So yeah,
Awesome. Thanks, Mel.
First, I'm going to have to share now, aren't I? I have a lot going on. When you sort of start to dissect it and you go, oh, which one do I want to actually tackle first? This is probably a really big one. So I'd probably say I spend a lot of my time either taking on the new role here at work or The rest of my time is consumed with renovating an old house. And there is a lot of scope there that is out of my control, which I don't like. That is my weakness, because I have builders and suppliers that I have a huge trust issue with. So a very big weakness that I have there that I have to do a lot of work on, because I am a bit of a control junkie when it comes to that. I have my spreadsheets, I have my time frames, and that's a very big weakness that that I do need to work on. That when my hubby is the complete polar opposite, and he's laid back, going, it'll happen when it happens. Don't worry about it. So it's a good grounding that I have him about, because it brings me down those 100 notches that I need to come down. And when you say that that you were that you've got that little bit of fiery aspect to you. I've got that in buckets as well. So he's great to sort of throw that water on for me in that regard, and have have that grounding aspect with him to sort of get through. So where my weaknesses are, they're his strengths. So it's learning from him, swallowing the pride. It's a lot of fun.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because often our weaknesses are also our strengths. They are simply one extreme or the other, right? So I would say, one of your strengths is that you're a good organizer, which is, have things in control, got detail orientation. I would say that that's a strength. And so it gets applied as a weakness, or considered a weakness, when it goes to one or the other of the polar opposites, right?
Yeah.
And how do you know when it becomes a weakness? When you start feeling like shit.
Yeah.
Right? And chasing your tail around, that's when you know, okay, this strength that I have in being organizing and detail, all of that is suddenly I've taken it to an extreme, because my body's telling me, my system's telling me that I have.
Yeah.
And that's when maybe, hubbies are just chill about it. Is wise words, particularly if he sees your system activated, because it could sneak up on you so quickly that you don't even recognize it.
Oh, he sees it.
Yeah.
Way before I do.
Yeah. I just realized I'm sort of, the sun's going down here, and so I've got a mask on my chin.
Joker.
Yes. Okay. So I will share again once I find the little sharey thing. So one of the things that happens to some ships anyway is shipwrecks. And so this next little section is about shipwrecks, because shipwrecks to me are all about resilience. And so most of us have been either shipwrecked, or we've run aground, or we've stalled, right, at some point in our life. And it could have been, the full-blown shipwreck deal. It could have just been stalled for a little bit of life. And usually those shipwrecks are related to some kind of trauma, shock, or stress, and they can be in multiple areas. So financial trauma, for example, a bankruptcy, or not being able to pay the rent, or whatever would be, considered in that trauma. So in relationships, career, finances, and health are some of the most common areas where people find themselves stranded and helpless. And so in our Certificate 3 in Personal Empowerment, we do spend a lot of time on what it looks like for us to develop resilience at the same time that we develop capacity. And to me, they're tied very much together, okay? So when I have a capacity to be a certain level of patience, for example. And then when I snap, what's my ability to be resilient and re-engage with that situation from a grounded level? That's resilience. So what I'm trying to do is build my capacity to stretch more, be more patient, and also, if I do snap, which, you know, we do from time to time, that I am able to come back from that. That's the resilience part. Does that make sense? So in our certificate 3, we talk about resilience being the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, or any significant source of stress. Everything's great when the sun's shining and the wind is blowing gently and the seagulls are out watching us and the other boats are sailing along nicely, sending us little messages. Okay, we're all fine when that's what our sailboat metaphor life looks like. What really shows up in our capacity and resilience is that when something goes off, like there's a rock there, or the wind's a little bit too heavy for us, or stormy waters, when something goes wrong, we generally use that judgment, is how do I cope then? And Karen, you know that the whole Karen horrible thing that goes on, you know, anyone that's doing the crazy thing is called Karen. Your name's spelt differently and it's horrible, okay? So I'll leave the name out of it. You know the types of little scenarios and reels and stuff I'm talking about, right? So that's when somebody's world goes wrong and their whole system just goes, nah, 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 nah. So in the certificate 3, we talk about how to repair your sailboat, how to learn how to navigate rather than necessarily following the way that you were taught to navigate through your conditioning and upbringing and all the baggage that comes with that. So learning how to navigate your life from your own set of values. And then learning how to maneuver, you know, around life circumstances. So there's quite a lot more information obviously presented in the certificate 3. Another little gift for today. So for you guys, I can send this to you. It's a little booklet called Developing Resilience Using the Sailboat Metaphor. And it goes through those 3 things in a little bit more detail, which, you know, because it's more content, obviously we keep these little 1 hour short and sharp. And if anyone is watching this, Karen, who would be the best person, or Mel, for them to contact? Maybe info@blueprintcd.com.au. So if you're watching this and you would like a copy of that booklet too, just email info@blueprintcd.com.au and we'll arrange to get that to you. And so we're almost time for finishing. Do either of you have any questions or comments or something that you'd like expanded on at this time?
No, I don't have any questions, but certainly, yeah, the whole analogy is sort of giving me something to, yeah, to sort of focus myself and ground myself back on, yeah, those strengths and weaknesses, yeah. And yeah, really, really good. So thanks.
Yeah. And that's what I like about a lot of these, let's say, philosophical and psychological models is we're still human. We you know, regardless of how we describe that, what model we use, what profile we use, we're all humans. What they do is give you, let's say, the pointy edge to start to really pay attention to yourself. And I think that's something that as humans we do quite poorly, actually, right? And, you know, I remember there was an ad years ago just soldier on. Soldier on. It was a Codral ad, right? You know, and to me, you know, I look at those things and it's like, that's just completely, you know, ignoring what your body is telling you. And I think we could pay better attention to ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually even, right? And any philosophy or any model like this one is just going to be, you know, the wedge to open the door for some more self-understanding. I'm getting a suntan now. Well, thank you for joining, the two of you, and thank you to everyone who does decide to watch this. You've got an email address, and if you are interested in joining in with our upcoming Certificate 3 in Personal Empowerment, you can also email or contact Blueprint about that, and we'd love to have you on a more substantive journey with us. Have a terrific day.
Thanks, Donna.
Thanks, Donna.